Hello. Hi, I'm Matilda. We are going to start this with a little exercise. So I would like you to close your eyes. And you can just let my voice guide you for the next few minutes. Now, take your hands and clasp them together. And put them behind your neck, behind your head. Gently pull your head downwards. We're going to be here for, again, a little while, so you can soften and relax. Allow your elbows to drop naturally, and see if you can relax some muscles, especially around the shoulders, the arms, soften the jaw. Allow all the muscles of your face to gently open. For a moment, take a look at your breathing, or notice your breathing. Whether you're perhaps holding it tight. Perhaps you're breathing from the nose, maybe more from the upper body. Maybe see if you can allow, again, your belly, your stomach to soften. And as we stay in this position, you might have noticed it can become a little bit uncomfortable after a while. See if you can bring yourself to 8 out of 10 in terms of discomfort. So you can adjust your posture a little bit, maybe sitting up more straight, maybe relaxing some of the pressure from the hands. You want to be able to hold the posture sustainably, but also for it to be genuinely uncomfortable on some level. So if it feels a bit easy just now, add on a little more tension. We'll hold it just for a few more moments. And if your mind is wandering all over the place, just bring it back to your breath. Back inside your body. And then gradually, keeping your eyes closed, you can release your hands and uncurl the neck. And gradually, perhaps open your eyes. Hi.
Hi.
Oh, hi. So, we're going to talk a little bit about anxiety. Surprise, surprise. Now, as was just mentioned, actually quite nicely, I believe anxiety is a really good thing. However, that's quite recent. I've suffered from anxiety for a long, long time, pretty much since as long as I can remember. But I always used to repress it. I tried to get rid of it, or override it, or delete it, or just somehow avoid feeling it in some way. And you could say that's quite a natural human tendency. Like you probably just experienced, when we're uncomfortable, our body has an urge to make things okay again. And I think, especially with anxiety, this is quite a common tendency. We want to essentially just feel good again, and we basically ignore what's underlying. And I think that is a problem, because I think we're missing very valuable information that is lying there underneath the surface. Now, perhaps I can illustrate this with a few examples around my anxiety. The first one I wanted to share is around my upbringing. When I was young, I moved around a lot. I was born in Japan, in Tokyo, and I was there for 3 years. Then I moved to Australia, in Sydney, and I was there for about 6 years, a couple of different houses. Then at the age of 9, I moved to France. I was in the countryside for a little while, and then up around Paris, I was there for about 8 years. And then I moved to London when I was 18. Again, a few different places around there. Then I moved again to Scotland, and I've been in Edinburgh for about 2.5 years now. Now, I was incredibly anxious growing up about not having a home, not having a place that I knew I was from. When people asked me, oh, where are you from? It always took me about 5 minutes to explain. And that made me very anxious because I didn't have any roots. I didn't really have anywhere to go back to. And everyone around me, my peers, my friends, they always had those couple of friends that they'd known since they were 2 or even younger that had followed them their whole life, and I didn't have that, and it felt really, really unstable. So that's example number 1. Example number 2, last year I became self-employed. I quit my 9-to-5 student job that I'd taken up full-time and which I deeply hated. And I decided to just go for it, even though I didn't have a plan at all, really. I'd been offered one project, and that project worked for a while, and then another one came up, and the first one fell through, and then this other one came up, and this one fell through. And I spent the greater part of 2017 having repeated panic attacks about how I would pay my rent, basically the next month, and should I keep doing this, which perhaps some of you can relate to. So that would be example number 2. The third example, which you might have heard again throughout this evening, is preparing for this bloody talk, which made me incredibly anxious, and perhaps not to the point of a panic attack, thank God, but not far off either, to the point where I was like, do I really want to do this? Maybe there's still time to pull out. So the problem was in each of these situations, well, there's a couple of commonalities. The first was that I was trying to use self-help tips, if you like, stuff that I'd found either on the internet or even in counselling, and I was really frustrated with them. Stuff like, take a few deep breaths, or just focus on the positives, or just tell yourself that it's going to be all right. Or just have a chat with a friend. Now, some of those have value, definitely, and work, but very much in the short term in my experience. And actually, it was only a matter of time until the anxiety came back because it wasn't addressing the root of the problem. And that actually left me feeling even weaker when the anxiety came back. The other commonality between these 3 examples is that I was trying to, again, override the anxiety, and these sort of self-soothing tips were essentially saying, just do what you can to get that feeling to go away. And that's where the problem lied. So actually, what I really needed to do was to stay with it, to let that feeling come up and really feel it completely, no matter how scary that was, let it come up in my body. So when I was growing up, or when I was feeling uprooted and unstable, what I really needed to do was learn how to stay still, how to stay in one place, how to commit to one city, for example, and trust that if I did, I would learn how to build roots, and those things would come about. In the second example, when I was panicking about how to pay my rent, what I really needed to do was, first of all, forgive myself for being inexperienced and not really having a plan. And also I had to practice humility to understand that, well, if I needed stability, I needed to have the humility to go back to my old student job and ask for work, for part-time work, just to make it through the difficult months. And in the case of preparing for this talk, the thing that was really making me anxious was the fact that obviously everyone here is going to pick holes in my arguments and find the points that are obviously wrong, and it's all about judgment, as it usually is with public speaking. And what I really needed to do was let go of perfection and just show up and say, actually no, I am completely a beginner, and that's the truth, and I often feel like I don't know what I'm doing, even though sometimes I'm quite good at pretending. Now, what the hell has this got to do with the exercise we just did? By the way, that was an exercise in yin yoga. Yin as in yin and yang. And essentially, it's basically what I teach sometimes around the city nowadays. And the skill basically that I needed and that my self-help tips weren't giving me was the ability to cope with adversity, to really engage with chaos, with this internal feeling of chaos that anxiety was bringing. And also in other realms of life outside, coping with adversity and all sorts in life. Now, yin yoga is literally the practice of inviting small amounts of stress into the body and staying with it. So we hold poses for a long time. We switch off muscles, which are the protective structures of the skeleton, and we deliberately make the bones and the joints uncomfortable, a little bit painful. And we practice staying with it and sitting with it and feeling it, and then learning that actually, if you do, things change. The pain will pass, or you will learn something about how to manage the situation. So it's essentially a practice ground or a laboratory for courage and a skillful way of navigating chaos. So what I wanted to do for the few minutes that are left, essentially is just to share some of the things that I've learned through my practice. I discovered yin yoga about a year ago, and I've learned strategies about how to deal with chaos. I've learned a lot about myself and my tendencies, and I've learned some general sort of principles around adversity. So, for example, in terms of strategies, I've really finally understood that I have to pace myself. I've started playing a longer game. I take my time when I have something difficult to do. I've learned that there's a time to push and a time to pull back. There's times where being fierce is really good, and there's times where being very receptive and actually creating space for others is better. I've also learned that in the long game, often that second option is more powerful and brings me more control. I've learned a lot about myself in the sense that, for example, I've learned the difference between when I actually can't do something or whether I just don't feel like doing it or don't want to because I'm afraid of failure or afraid of the feeling of inadequacy. That's a big one for me. And in general, I've learned a lot about discomfort. The main thing, I think, being that I don't see discomfort or anxiety or pain as negative anymore. It's just neutral. And actually what it is information. It's like a guide. It can shed information on what I need to improve on, the opportunities that I have to be a better human and a little bit closer to who I actually want to be. And that also leads me to, I guess, one of the last points here. I've learned a lot more about confidence. I really used to think that confidence was about feeling good about myself or being able to just constantly think positively. And now I know that actually it's about repeatedly exposing myself to difficulty again and again and again and again, and it will never end, and that's how I build trust with myself. So just to finish off, I guess, give you a couple of messages. Now, the first thing I wanted to send you off with, yin yoga is not necessarily the only way to train this by any means. There's lots of ways you can practice engaging with adversity. But it is a really nice place to start if you feel like you're stuck or you don't know how to cope with your anxiety, or maybe you are just very keen on feeling competent and capable and you want to use any advantage you have. But I would, again, encourage you guys to engage with it and without waiting to feel ready or for the right time and things like that. My final message would be, next time you experience anxiety or just fear on some level, perhaps we can remember to stop and remember that there's an opportunity here to shed light on the direction that you need to go so that we can ultimately make friends with anxiety, which will then put us back in control. Thank you.